The labor auction went down every first Tuesday of the month at the Hendersons' place, and I never thought I'd be there as a buyer. 8 months pregnant weighed heavy on me as I watched men get up on the makeshift stage, offering their services for food and shelter. The situation was desperate for all of us. They needed work. I needed hands to save what was left of the Crawford Ranch. Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. My name's Amanda Rose Crawford, and 3 months ago I was just a widow trying to deal with losing Benjamin. Today, with an $18,000 debt piled up and a deadline till October to pay it all off, I was about to lose the only thing I had left of our life together. The ranch in Willowridge Valley was always our dream, but without Benjamin to take care of the cattle and repairs, everything fell apart fast. The crowd around me murmured bids as the men introduced themselves. $50 a month, 70, some even hit 100. I only had 50 to offer, and I knew I couldn't compete with the richer farmers. My belly shifted, like the baby knew our shaky situation. That's when he got on stage, tall, broad-shouldered, with visible scars on his face that told war stories. His blue eyes scanned the crowd with a distant look, like he was somewhere else entirely. When he spoke, his voice was low but firm. Nathan James Hartwell, Army veteran. I can do any kind of farm work, building, irrigation, cattle management, just looking for a place to stay and food on the table. The bids started immediately. $80, 90, 120. I closed my eyes, knowing I was losing another battle in this war my life had become. When I opened them, he was staring straight at me. $50, I yelled before I could stop myself. The crowd laughed. The auctioneer shook his head, waiting for bigger bids. But Nathan raised his hand. I accept the lady's offer, he said, stepping off the stage and heading straight for me. The silence that followed was deafening. Men offering double stood agape as Nathan walked up to me. Up close, I could see his hands were calloused from hard work, but there was something in his eyes I couldn't quite figure out. Why? I asked when we got to my beat-up truck. Everyone deserves a chance, he replied, tossing his single bag into the truck bed. The drive back to the ranch was quiet. I drove slow on the dirt roads, feeling the weight of what I'd just done. I'd brought a stranger home, a war veteran who could be anyone. But something about his presence calmed me, even without understanding why. When we arrived, I pulled the truck up in front of the main house and watched Nathan size up the property. The barn needed urgent repairs. Fences were down in several spots, and the irrigation system had completely failed over the summer. It was work for 5 men, not one. It's not much, I admitted, getting out of the truck with difficulty. Seen worse, he said, grabbing my bag from the truck bed before I could protest. Where do you want me to stay? I pointed to the old bunkhouse behind the barn. Benjamin always said he'd fix the place up, but he never had time. Now it looked like a shelter, only fit for someone truly desperate. It's got running water and electricity. The bed might be a little dusty. Nathan nodded and walked toward the building. I stood watching until he disappeared through the door, wondering if I'd made a terrible mistake or if finally something would go right in my life. The next morning, I woke to the sound of hammering before the sun was up. Through the kitchen window, I saw Nathan fixing the fence near the main pasture. He worked with precise, efficient movements, like he knew exactly what to do. In 3 hours, he'd repaired more fence than Benjamin could in a week. During breakfast, I tried talking to him, but Nathan only answered what was necessary. I found out he'd fought in the war for 4 years and that he was from California, but nothing beyond that. There was a deep sadness in his eyes that I recognized, the same one I saw in the mirror every day. The first few days set our routine. Nathan worked from 5 in the morning until sunset. Stopping only for meals, I insisted on serving on the porch. He never came into the main house, always keeping a respectful distance. I spent mornings tending to the few animals left, and afternoons trying to sort out the disastrous finances Benjamin had left behind. It was in the 3rd week that everything started to change. Nathan had repaired the irrigation system and noticed we had way more usable land than I'd imagined. During dinner, he made a suggestion that would change everything. Have you ever thought about boarding other farmers' cattle? He asked, stirring the stew on his plate. What do you mean? During droughts, a lot of farmers need pastures. You charge a monthly fee per head of cattle and provide water and pasture. They keep ownership of the animals. You make money with no upfront investment. The idea was simple and brilliant. With the improvements Nathan had made to the irrigation, we could support a lot more cattle than our few animals. It could be exactly what we needed to pay off the debts. How much do you think we could charge? $5 a head per month. If we can board 300 head, that's $1,500 monthly. I did the math quickly. In a year, we could not only pay off the debt but have a reserve for emergencies. It was risky, but I was willing to try anything. How do we find these farmers? Leave that to me, Nathan said, with a rare smile that completely transformed his face. The next week, Nathan disappeared for 2 days. When he came back, he had contracts with 5 different farmers, totaling 250 head of cattle. He'd even gotten advances for us to prepare the necessary infrastructure. How'd you get all this so fast? I asked, flipping through the documents. I know people, he replied vaguely. There was something mysterious about the way Nathan conducted business. He talked to farmers like an equal, showed knowledge that seemed to go beyond a simple farmhand's experience. But every time I tried to dig into his past, he skillfully changed the subject. The first batch of cattle arrived on a rainy Tuesday. Nathan coordinated the operation with military precision, directing the animals to the appropriate pastures and organizing records like he'd been doing it for decades. In a week, our quiet ranch transformed into a bustling, prosperous property. Evenings started to change too. After dinner, Nathan stayed on the porch longer, talking about plans for the next day. He helped me up from the chair when my belly was too heavy, always with respectful gentleness. These moments became the part of the day I looked forward to most. It was during one of these late-night talks that I realized I was falling for him. Nathan talked about expanding operations, building new animal shelters, implementing modern management technologies. His eyes glowed when he described the possibilities, and I saw in him not just an employee, but a partner who shared my vision for the ranch's future. Are you sure you want to stay here? I asked one night, when the conversation turned to long-term plans. Nathan was silent for a moment, looking at the stars. I don't have anywhere else to go, he finally said. And this place, it's starting to feel like home. My baby kicked hard right then, as if approving the answer. Every day that passed, Nathan proved more indispensable. Not just for the physical work, but for how he anticipated problems, suggested solutions, and made me feel like I wasn't alone in this fight. He installed a radio communication system for emergencies, organized efficient feeding schedules for the animals, and even built a small office where I could work comfortably, even with my big belly. Evelyn, Benjamin's aunt, came to visit at the end of the second month. She watched Nathan work with critical eyes, but after a 5-minute conversation with him about cattle management techniques, she was completely won over. That man knows more about farming than Benjamin and you put together, she said privately. Where did he come from anyway? I'm not sure, I admitted. He doesn't talk much about his past. Men with secrets can be dangerous, Amanda, but they can also be exactly what we need when everything else fails. Evelyn was right. Nathan carried secrets, that was obvious, but he also carried a competence and dedication that were saving our property. More importantly, he carried a gentleness that was healing wounds in my heart I didn't even know existed. The third month brought real prosperity. We had a waiting list for cattle boarding, and Nathan suggested expanding to include training services for young animals. The numbers on the spreadsheets finally showed positive values, and for the first time since Benjamin's death, I could sleep without worrying about the bank. But it was also in the third month that I started noticing inconsistencies in Nathan's story. His work clothes were exceptionally good quality, though worn. He received correspondence from prestigious banks, which he always put away without comment. And there were times he'd talk about modern agricultural techniques with a knowledge that only came from extensive formal education. Nathan, I asked one afternoon while he was organizing documents, in the office, did you study agriculture at a university? He paused, pen suspended over a report. I learned on the job, he replied without looking at me. It was a lie. I knew it was a lie, But I also knew Nathan had his reasons for keeping secrets. He'd come into our lives when we needed him most, transforming despair into hope. Whatever his past, I was grateful to have him in the present. The baby was getting more and more active, kicking especially during our porch conversations. Nathan noticed and started bringing extra pillows to support my back. One night, when a kick was particularly strong, he asked if he could feel. I placed his large, calloused hand on my belly. The baby kicked immediately, as if recognizing his touch. Nathan smiled, a genuine, full smile I'd never seen before. "She's going to be strong," he said softly. "How do you know it's a girl?" "Intuition," he replied, keeping his hand where it was. Girls are usually more determined than boys. In that moment, with his hand on my belly and stars shining above us, I felt something I hadn't experienced since before Benjamin's death. Hope. Not just about saving the ranch, but about building a new life. A life that might include the mysterious man who had accepted my $50 offer and transformed our property into something prosperous and full of life. The 4th month arrived with the first signs of autumn, and with it, the realization that Nathan had become so much more than an employee. He was my partner in every sense, except on paper. We worked together during the day, planned together during meals, and I slept better knowing he was nearby. But it was also the month when my curiosity about his past became impossible to ignore. Nathan took calls he answered privately, had knowledge of financial markets he casually mentioned, and once I saw him reading a San Francisco financial newspaper like it was something familiar. Who was Nathan James Hartwell, really? And why was a man with his apparent knowledge and resources working for $50 a month on a rundown ranch in Montana? The answers would come soon, but for now, I was content to live in the hope he had brought into my life. The ranch was thriving, my baby was growing healthy, and for the first time in months, I believed everything would work out. The 5th month brought changes none of us were prepared to face. Autumn arrived earlier than expected, and with it, a series of events that would test everything Nathan and I had built together. The first hint of trouble came through an official letter that arrived on a cold September morning. I was in the kitchen making coffee when I heard Nathan talking on the phone in the office. His voice was tense, different from the calm tone I knew. When he hung up, he was silent for several minutes before coming to find me. "Amanda, we need to talk," he said, holding an official envelope in his hands. "A notice arrived from the state agricultural department. They want to inspect our cattle for possible diseases." My heart pounded. An inspection like that could mean quarantine, lost contracts, or even worse, the shutdown of our operations. All the progress we'd made in recent months could disappear overnight. "But our animals are healthy," I protested. "You check them daily yourself." "I know," Nathan said, but there was something in his expression that made me uneasy. "I'm going to make some calls to understand the situation better." Over the next few days, Nathan seemed increasingly tense. He worked with the same efficiency as always, but I noticed he made frequent phone calls and received correspondence that he studied carefully before putting away. One afternoon, when I went into the office to get some documents, I found him analyzing papers that looked like complex financial reports. "Nathan, can you tell me what's really going on?" I asked directly. He sighed and leaned back in his chair. For a moment, I thought he'd finally tell me the truth about his past, but then he shook his head. "It's complicated, Amanda. There are people who don't like to see small farmers prosper. Sometimes they use bureaucracy to create problems." It wasn't a complete answer, but I felt that Nathan was protecting not only his secrets, but me too. My pregnancy was coming to an end, already in the 8th month, and maybe he didn't want to worry me unnecessarily. The inspection happened on a chilly Tuesday. 3 men in suits showed up with equipment and official documents, examining every animal on our property. Nathan accompanied them throughout the process, demonstrating a knowledge of regulations that surprised me. He spoke to the inspectors like someone familiar with government protocols, not like a simple farmhand. "Everything seems to be in order," said the lead inspector at the end of the day. "But we'll need some additional lab tests. The results will be out in 2 weeks. 2 weeks of uncertainty. 2 weeks in which our contracts would be suspended and our reputation would be at risk." When the inspectors left, Nathan and I stood on the porch watching their vans disappear down the dirt road. They didn't find anything because there's nothing to find, Nathan said firmly. But someone is trying to hurt us. Who would do that? Competitors, maybe, or people who have an interest in seeing this property fail. The possibility scared me. We had worked so hard to save the ranch, and now someone was actively trying to sabotage us. But why? We were just a small cattle boarding business, not a threat to anyone. During the following week, other problems started to pop up. 2 of our biggest contracts were canceled without explanation. Suppliers who had always been punctual started delaying deliveries. And then we received a notification from the bank questioning some of the payments we had received. This isn't a coincidence, Nathan said after analyzing all the documents spread out on the office table. Someone is coordinating a campaign against us. That night, I had trouble sleeping. The baby was especially active, as if sensing my anxiety. Around 2 a.m, I got up to drink water and saw a light on in the bunkhouse. Nathan was also awake, probably worried about the same situation. The next morning, he appeared in the kitchen earlier than usual. There was a determination in his eyes that I hadn't seen in days. "Amanda, I need to take a trip," he said. "I'm going to the state capitol to sort some things out personally." What kind of things? Talk to people who might have influence over these investigations. Find out who's behind the problems. The idea of Nathan leaving, even temporarily, terrified me. He had become my safe harbor, especially now that I was so close to giving birth. But I knew we needed answers. "How long will you be gone?" "Maybe 3 days. Can Evelyn stay with you?" I agreed, though I didn't like the idea. Evelyn arrived the next afternoon, bringing her usual direct opinions about the situation. "That man has resources and connections that don't match the story he tells," she said as we prepared dinner. "Not that that's necessarily bad, but you should know who you're sharing your life with." "I trust him," I replied, and I realized it was true. Despite all the mysteries, Nathan had shown dedication and care that went beyond any professional obligation. Trust is good, dear, but knowing is better. Nathan left the next morning, promising to call every day. In the 3 days that followed, the ranch seemed empty without his constant presence. The animals were well cared for, but I missed our conversations on the porch and the security his competence gave me. His calls were brief and uninformative. He was making progress and following some leads, but nothing specific. On the 3rd night, he didn't call. Not on the 4th either. "Maybe he's somewhere without signal," Evelyn suggested, but I saw the worry in her eyes. On the 5th morning, when I was already considering calling the authorities, Nathan showed up driving a different car, an expensive black sedan that definitely didn't belong to a farmhand making $50 a month. "I got some answers," he said, but his expression was grim. "And some complications, too." We sat in the living room, where Nathan spread documents and photographs on the coffee table. There were contracts, financial records, and photos of men I didn't recognize. "The campaign against us is being coordinated by a consortium of regional farmers," he explained. "They want to buy this property for a fraction of its real value, and they're using political influence to force us into bankruptcy." "But why this property specifically?" Nathan hesitated before answering. "Because there are valuable mineral deposits underground, copper and possibly other metals. The real value of this land is about 10 times what you owe the bank." The revelation stunned me. Benjamin had never mentioned anything about minerals. Had he known? Or was this a recent discovery? "How did you find all this out?" Again, Nathan paused. I could see the internal conflict in his expression, as if he was deciding how much of the truth to share. "I have some contacts in the state government," he finally said. "People who owe me favors." It wasn't the whole truth, but I felt Nathan was protecting something important. Maybe his military past gave him access to information ordinary people wouldn't have. "What do we do now?" "First, we're going to document everything properly to protect our property rights. Second, we're going to publicly expose what this consortium is trying to do. And third," he stopped, looking directly at me. "Third, you need to know this could get dangerous. We're dealing with people who have a lot of money at stake." A shiver ran down my spine. The idea that powerful people were trying to hurt us was already scary. Knowing they could become genuinely dangerous was terrifying. Do you think we should sell and leave? No, Nathan said firmly. This is your home, Amanda. Your daughter deserves to grow up in the place that belongs to your family. We're going to fight. In the weeks that followed, Nathan implemented security measures that seemed excessive for a rural farm. He installed cameras, changed all the locks, and established protocols for visitors. He also started making nightly rounds, something that made me uneasy because it suggested the danger was real and immediate. The results of the veterinary inspection arrived on a Friday. As expected, all the animals were perfectly healthy. But on the same day, we received a notification that an additional investigation would be necessary due to financial record irregularities. They're fabricating problems, Nathan said with controlled anger. Every time we solve one issue, they create another. That night, we had our most serious conversation yet. I was 9 months pregnant, uncomfortable and emotionally exhausted by the constant stress. Nathan helped me get comfortable on the porch with extra pillows and brought hot tea. Nathan, I need to know who you really are, I said directly. I can't pretend anymore that I don't notice the inconsistencies. You have knowledge, resources, and connections that don't fit your story. He was silent for a long time, looking at the distant mountains. When he spoke, his voice was heavy with a sadness I'd never heard before. My name really is Nathan James Hartwell. I really am a veteran, but I also was the owner of one of the largest agricultural operations in California, Hartwell Enterprises. Maybe you've heard of it. I knew the name. It was impossible not to if you followed agribusiness news. Hartwell Enterprises was an empire that included farms, food processing, and agricultural technology. I was married, he continued. Sarah, we had a daughter, Emily, 3 years old. His past was finally being revealed, and I felt it was a painful story. They died in a car accident while I was on a business trip. After that, everything lost meaning. I sold the company, donated most of the money, and wandered from place to place trying to find a purpose. The pieces started to fit. The competence, the resources, the knowledge of business and regulations. Is that why you accepted my offer at the auction? You reminded me of Sarah, pregnant, determined, fighting against all odds. And this place, it reminded me of what it was like when I started before everything became about money and power. Tears streamed down my face. Nathan's story was both tragic and hopeful. He had lost everything he loved, but had found a new chance at purpose in our fight to save the ranch. Do you still have access to those resources? Some. Enough to face the consortium that's trying to take us down. But Amanda, you need to understand, if we use these resources, our lives will change. We won't be able to pretend we're just a small ranch struggling to survive anymore. It was an important decision. Accepting Nathan's help would mean accepting that he was much more than the broken man I'd met at the auction. It would also mean accepting that our relationship was based on more than mutual need. What if I say yes? What happens to us? Nathan turned to face me directly. That depends on you, Amanda. I've already fallen in love with this life, with this place, with you. If you accept me as I really am, with all the past and resources that implies, then we'll fight together, as true partners. It was a proposal and a confession at the same time. Nathan was offering not only his financial resources, but his heart. And I realized my heart had already made the decision weeks ago. Yes, I said simply. He smiled, that rare smile that completely transformed his face, and took my hand. Then let's show these men what happens when they mess with the wrong family. In the days that followed, Nathan gradually revealed the extent of his resources. He still maintained significant investments, properties in various states, and a network of contacts that included politicians, businessmen, and specialized lawyers. More importantly, he had detailed information about all the members of the consortium that was trying to harm us. They think they're dealing with naive farmers, he said, as he organized strategies on his laptop. They have no idea they're facing someone who's played this game at a national level for 15 years. Nathan's first counteroffensive was brilliant in its simplicity. He publicly exposed the conflicts of interest of several government inspectors who had financial connections with the consortium. The report, published in the state's largest newspaper, caused a scandal that resulted in the suspension of several investigations against small farmers in the region. The second strategy was more direct. Nathan used his contacts to organize a coalition of farmers who were facing similar problems. United, they had enough political power to influence state-level decisions. But it was the third strategy that really changed the game. Nathan acquired, through shell companies, strategic properties around the consortium's farms. Suddenly, they found themselves surrounded by land controlled by their anonymous opponent. "This is how the game is played at the level they chose," Nathan explained. "Now they know that facing small farmers will have consequences." During this period, my pregnancy reached its end. I was officially 9.5 months along, and the baby could arrive at any moment. Nathan installed a direct communication system with the hospital and organized alternate routes in case the main road was blocked by snow. "You thought of everything," I commented one morning as he checked the emergency medical supplies he had bought. "I can't control when your daughter decides to be born," he said, "but I can make sure we're prepared." It was comforting to have someone so organized taking care of the details, especially when my own concentration was compromised by physical discomfort. Nathan had become much more than a business partner. He was acting like an anxious father, waiting for the birth of his own child. The situation with the consortium came to a head on an October afternoon. Nathan received a call informing him that representatives of the group wanted a meeting to discuss terms. It was obviously an attempt to negotiate a way out now that they realized they were facing serious opposition. "I'll meet with them," Nathan said. "It's time to end this once and for all." "I'm not staying here waiting," I replied. "If it's about our property, I have a right to be there." Nathan hesitated. "Amanda, you're 9 months pregnant. This kind of confrontation can be stressful. And staying home imagining what's happening wouldn't be?" He smiled and shook his head. "Sarah used to say the same thing. Pregnant women can be more stubborn than mules." The meeting was scheduled for the law office in town. Nathan and I arrived together, me uncomfortable but determined to participate in decisions about our future. The consortium was represented by 5 men in suits, all with confident expressions that quickly changed when Nathan entered the room. "Gentlemen," Nathan said casually, "I understand you want to discuss the situation of the Crawford property." The group's leader, a man named Morrison, whom I recognized as the owner of the largest farm in the region, looked confused. "I thought we were meeting with Mrs. Crawford and her employee." "I'm Nathan Hartwell," Nathan simply said. "Perhaps you've heard of me." The recognition was immediate and dramatic. Morrison paled. Another man dropped his documents, and the group's lawyer began nervously flipping through papers. "Impossible," Morrison murmured. "Nathan Hartwell is dead, or missing. No one knows where." "I'm very much alive," Nathan said, sitting down calmly, "and very interested in understanding why you're trying to steal my partner's property." What followed was one of the most impressive lessons in power and negotiation I had ever witnessed. Nathan systematically dismantled each of the strategies they had used against us, presenting evidence of corruption, manipulation of government contracts, and conspiracy to harm small farmers. "You have 2 options," he finally said. "First, you immediately cease all activities against the Crawford property and other small farmers in the region, pay adequate compensation for the damages caused, and hope I don't decide to turn this into a federal matter." "And the second option?" Morrison asked in a strained voice. Nathan smiled, but there was no humor in his expression. "I use all the resources at my disposal to financially destroy each of you. And believe me, I have enough resources to turn your lives into a legal nightmare that will last for years." The meeting ended with the consortium agreeing to all of Nathan's terms. They would sign admissions of guilt, pay damages, and guarantee that no small farmer in the region would be bothered again. Nathan had won so completely that it almost seemed anticlimactic. "How does it feel to be officially free of threats?" he asked as we drove back home. "Relieved, grateful, and a little intimidated," I admitted. "Seeing you in action was impressive." "It was my life before," he said. "Power, strategy, winning at all costs. For a long time, I thought that was success. And now? Now I know that success is having a place to call home and people to love." We arrived at the ranch as the sun was setting. The mountains in the distance were covered in fresh snow, and the air had that biting cold that announced winter's arrival. Nathan helped me out of the car, his hand lingering on mine longer than necessary. "Amanda," he said softly, "now that you know who I really am, you also need to know that my feelings for you have nothing to do with convenience or need." He paused, looking directly into my eyes. "I love you. I love your strength, your determination, the way you fight for what you believe in. I love the idea of helping raise your daughter and building a family in this place that you two have turned into a home for me." Tears streamed down my face. "I love you too, Nathan, and not just because you saved the ranch." He kissed me then, softly, as if I were something precious that could break. It was our first kiss, but it felt natural, as if it was meant to happen since the day he stepped off that auction stage. We were still embracing when I felt the first strong contraction. It was different from the discomforts I'd been feeling for weeks. This was definitely the start of labor. "Nathan," I said, holding his arm, "I think it's time." He looked at me for a moment without understanding, then his eyes widened. "Now? Here?" "Babies don't follow schedules," I replied, trying to smile despite the contraction that was starting. Nathan immediately switched to crisis mode, checking equipment, calling the hospital, organizing everything with the military precision I had learned to admire. But when he helped me into the house, I could see genuine anxiety in his eyes. "It's going to be okay," I said, holding his hand. "We're going to be okay." He nodded, but I noticed his hands trembled slightly. The man who had faced a consortium of powerful businessmen without batting an eye was nervous about the prospect of childbirth. "Nathan," I said during a pause between contractions, "do you want to be present when she's born?" "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. You are. You're going to be her father, aren't you?" His smile was the most beautiful answer I could have asked for. Labor had begun, and with it, the final chapter of our journey from partners to a life together as a family. Outside, the wind began to howl, announcing a storm that would turn our night of joy into a fight for survival that would test everything we had built together. The sound of the wind steadily increased as my contractions intensified. Nathan had called the hospital, but the nurse said with the storm approaching, it would be safer to wait until labor was more advanced before trying the trip. The rural roads became treacherous with snow, and I was only at the beginning of the process. "How many hours does a first birth usually take?" Nathan asked, trying to keep his voice calm as he organized clean towels and hot water. "It can be 8 to 20 hours, I replied between controlled breaths, "but every baby is different." Nathan had transformed our room into a kind of makeshift medical center. He had first aid supplies, sterile water bottles, and even an emergency birth kit he had bought weeks ago, just in case. His meticulous preparation was proving providential. Around 9 o'clock, the snow began to fall heavily. Thick flakes danced beyond the windows, quickly accumulating on the ground. The wind howled through the trees with an intensity that made the whole house vibrate. It was clear we wouldn't be leaving until the storm passed. "Evelyn is trying to get here," Nathan said after taking a call. "But the main road is already impassable. She'll stay in town until tomorrow." A particularly strong contraction doubled me over. Nathan was immediately by my side, offering support and encouragement. His large, steady hands helped me stay focused, and his constant presence was more comforting than any medication could be. "You're doing great," he said softly, brushing hair from my sweaty face. "She's eager to meet the world." "How do you know so much about childbirth?" I asked during a pause. "I read every book I could find after you hired me," he admitted. "I wanted to be prepared for any emergency." It was so typical of Nathan. He approached everything in life with the same meticulous preparation, from repairing fences to confronting business consortiums. Now he was applying that dedication to ensure our daughter's birth was safe. Around midnight, the storm had turned into a true blizzard. Snow was blocking the lower windows, and the wind was so strong it sometimes felt like the house could be ripped from its foundations. My contractions were now 5 minutes apart, and the intensity was steadily increasing. "Nathan," I said during a moment of lucidity between waves of pain, "if something goes wrong—" "Nothing's going to go wrong," he said firmly. "You're the strongest woman I've ever met, and I'm going to make sure you and our daughter stay safe. Our daughter. The way he said those words made my heart pound, even more than the contractions. Nathan had completely embraced the idea of being this child's father, even knowing that biologically she wasn't his. At 2 a.m, something changed. The contractions suddenly became more frequent and intense. Nathan timed everything in a notebook, monitoring my progress with the precision of an experienced doctor. But when he checked his notes, his expression became worried. "What is it?" I asked. "The contractions are too close together. I think she's coming faster than we expected." As if responding to his words, I felt an intense and different pressure. My body was telling me it was time to push, whether I wanted to or not. "Nathan, I need to. I think I need to push now." He went pale for a moment, but quickly regained his composure. "All right, we'll do this together. I'm here." Nathan positioned himself to assist with the birth, with a calm that contrasted with the storm raging outside. His hands were firm and gentle, his voice constantly offering encouragement and instructions. It was as if he had done this 1,000 times before, though I knew he was as new to this experience as I was. The next hour was a mix of intense pain, concentrated effort, and moments of pure determination. Nathan remained by my side through it all, holding my hand, wiping my face, reminding me to breathe when the pain became overwhelming. "I can see the head," he suddenly said, his voice filled with emotion. "Amanda, she's almost here." With one last push that seemed to use all the energy I had left, I felt our daughter slip into Nathan's safe arms. For a terrifying moment, there was only silence. Then a strong, indignant cry filled the room. "She's perfect," Nathan said, with tears streaming down his face. "Amanda, she's absolutely perfect." He placed our daughter on my chest, and when I looked at that tiny, red, angry face, I felt a wave of love so intense it almost took my breath away. 10 tiny fingers, 10 tiny toes, a pair of lungs clearly working perfectly. "Hello, Faith," I murmured, gently touching her cheek. "We finally meet you." Nathan had chosen the name weeks ago, saying that Faith represented everything our journey had meant. Faith in the future, faith in each other, faith that everything would work out even when it seemed impossible. "She's beautiful," Nathan said, gently stroking the baby's dark hair. "Just like her mom." We were absorbed in our new daughter when a strange sound alerted us. It wasn't the wind, it was something closer and more ominous. Nathan immediately stood up, going to the window. "Fire," he said in a tense voice. "The barn's on fire." My heart stopped. The barn contained not only valuable equipment, but also enough hay to feed all the animals through the winter. If we lost everything, the ranch wouldn't survive until spring. "The cattle," I said, trying to get up. "No," Nathan said firmly, stopping me from getting out of bed. "You just gave birth. You're not going anywhere." "But the animals. I'll take care of the animals. You take care of our daughter." Nathan kissed my forehead and then Faith's. "Stay warm. I'll be back as soon as I can control the vet situation." He ran out into the storm, and I stayed holding our newborn daughter, listening to the wind howl and trying not to imagine the dangers Nathan faced out there. A fire during a blizzard was one of the worst possible emergencies, dangerous to fight and potentially devastating. Through the window, I could see orange flames dancing against the white snow. The contrast was simultaneously beautiful and terrifying. Nathan appeared and disappeared in the curtain of snow, moving between the burning barn and the corrals where the animals were housed. Faith cried, bringing my attention back to her. She was hungry, and I helped her find what she needed while keeping my ears attuned to the sounds coming from outside. The roar of the flames was getting louder, competing with the howl of the wind. An hour passed with no sign of Nathan. I was starting to panic when I heard the front door slam. Heavy footsteps approached the room, and Nathan appeared in the doorway, covered in soot and snow, but seemingly unharmed. "The animals are safe," he said, taking off his muddy boots. "I managed to move them to the protected pasture behind the house, but we lost the barn and all the hay." The loss was financially devastating, but seeing Nathan safe made everything else seem secondary. He had risked his life to save our animals, demonstrating once again the kind of man he was. "How did the fire start?" I asked. Nathan hesitated, wiping soot from his face. "It wasn't an accident, Amanda. I found empty fuel cans. Someone did this intentionally. The revelation chilled me. Even after our victory over the consortium, there were still people willing to hurt us. But who would be capable of setting fire to a barn during a storm, knowing there were animals at risk? But who would do that? Someone who doesn't like to lose, Nathan said darkly. Morrison and his friends signed agreements, but that doesn't mean everyone's happy with the outcome. Nathan approached the bed, looking at Faith sleeping in my arms. The tenderness in his expression contrasted dramatically with the controlled anger in his voice when he spoke about the arson. "I'll find out who did this," he said, "and I'll make sure they never try to harm us again." How? I have resources now that I didn't have before. Private investigators, specialized lawyers, contacts in law enforcement agencies. Whoever did this will pay for putting our family at risk. In the weeks that followed, Nathan implemented security measures that turned our ranch into a discreet fortress. Security cameras were installed at all strategic points, an alarm system connected directly to the local police station was activated, and Nathan hired a security company to make regular rounds. But the most significant change was emotional. Faith's birth during the storm and the arson that followed had solidified our union in a way no amount of romantic conversations could have. We faced a crisis together and came out stronger. Faith proved to be a relatively easy baby, sleeping well and gaining weight quickly. Nathan proved to be a natural father, waking for night feedings, changing diapers with surprising competence, and singing lullabies when she was fussy. Seeing that strong, capable man completely melt with our little daughter was one of the most touching sights of my life. "You've done this before," I commented one morning, watching Nathan bathe Faith with confident, gentle movements. His expression clouded for a moment. "Emily, my daughter with Sarah. She loved bath time." It was the first time he had specifically mentioned his lost daughter since our initial conversation about his past. I realized that taking care of Faith was helping Nathan heal wounds he had carried for years. "Faith likes you," I said softly. "And I like her," he replied, wrapping our daughter in a soft towel, more than I could have imagined. During the afternoons, while Faith slept, Nathan and I planned the reconstruction. Insurance would cover part of the fire damage, but Nathan suggested expanding beyond simple replacement. "We're going to build a modern complex," he said, spreading architectural plans on the kitchen table. Barns with fire safety systems, climate-controlled stables, and a training center for young people interested in agriculture. Training center? Programs for veterans who want to get into agriculture, young people from urban communities interested in rural life, even international exchange. We're turning this place into a model of how modern agriculture can be sustainable and profitable. Nathan's vision was ambitious and inspiring. He wanted to transform our ranch into a kind of educational institute that honored both our rural traditions and embraced modern technologies. "It would be expensive," I observed. Nathan smiled. "I have the resources, Amanda. And more importantly, we have the experience. Our story, from near bankruptcy to prosperity, is exactly the kind of example that can inspire others." Throughout the winter, Nathan worked tirelessly on the plans. He consulted architects specializing in rural construction, researched similar educational programs in other states, and even traveled to agricultural universities to study their training methods. But it was during one of these trips that we received confirmation of who had burned our barn. Nathan called on a February afternoon with news that was simultaneously satisfying and disturbing. "It was Morrison's youngest son," he said. "Thomas Morrison, 23 years old, history of alcohol and authority problems. Will they press charges? They've already been filed. Arson, danger to animals, destruction of property. He's facing significant jail time. And Morrison Sr.? He's cooperating completely. It seems the son acted on his own, trying to restore family honor after the agreement we signed. Justice was being served, but it didn't bring back our barn or the hay we lost." Fortunately, Nathan's vision for the future was rapidly materializing. Construction of the new complex began in the spring. Nathan supervised every detail, from the ventilation systems in the stables to the laboratories where future students could learn about animal nutrition and sustainable agriculture. Faith was growing quickly, reaching all her developmental milestones on time or early. At 6 months, she was already sitting up by herself and demonstrating a cheerful personality that lit up any room. Nathan spent hours playing with her, teaching her to clap and making faces that made her laugh uncontrollably. "She's smart like her mom," he said one afternoon, watching Faith carefully examine a toy before deciding how to explore it. "And determined like her dad," I replied, seeing our daughter persist in trying to reach an object that was just beyond her grasp. Nathan looked at me with that expression that had become familiar, part surprise, part gratitude, part deep love. "Dad," he repeated softly. I never thought I'd hear that word again. It was at that moment that I made a decision I had been considering for months. "Nathan, I want you to legally adopt Faith. I want her to have your last name." Tears welled in his eyes. "Are you sure?" "I'm sure. Faith Hartwell has a beautiful ring to it." He kissed me then, a kiss full of promises and gratitude and love that seemed to grow stronger with each passing day. The adoption process began the following week. Since there was no living biological father to contest, and since Nathan and I were planning to get married soon, the lawyers said it would be a relatively simple process. Summer brought the completion of construction and the start of the first training programs. 12 young veterans enrolled in the inaugural Sustainable Agriculture course, and Nathan hired specialized instructors from several renowned universities. "This is just the beginning," Nathan said during the inauguration ceremony. "In 5 years, we hope to be training hundreds of people annually." Watching Nathan give the inaugural speech, holding Faith in my lap, I felt a deep gratitude for the journey that brought us here. From a desperate seller at a labor auction to partner in one of the country's most innovative agricultural ventures, it seemed almost impossible. But it was during the inauguration party that Nathan asked the question I had been waiting for months. He had carefully arranged everything. After the guests left and Faith was asleep, he took me to the porch where we had so many important conversations. The mountains were bathed in the golden light of the sunset, and the valley stretched below us like a green sea dotted with peacefully grazing cattle. "Amanda," he said, taking my hands in his, "exactly 1 year ago, I was lost, aimless, wandering from place to place, trying to find some meaning in life." He paused, looking directly into my eyes. "You gave me my life back. This place, our daughter, our work together, all of it showed me that it's possible to start over, that it's possible to find happiness again after losing everything." Nathan then knelt, pulling a small box from his pocket. "Amanda Rose Crawford, will you marry me? Will you agree to build an official family with me and Faith? Will you be my partner, not just in business, but in life?" The ring was simple and elegant, a solitaire diamond in white gold that caught the sunset light beautifully. But more beautiful than any jewel was the expression of hope and love on the face of the man who had become everything to me. "Yes," I said without hesitation. "Yes, Nathan. Of course, yes." He slid the ring onto my finger and kissed me as the sun set behind the mountains. It was the perfect end to a journey that had begun with despair and ended with more happiness than I had ever imagined possible. Our wedding ceremony was held 6 months later on a golden autumn afternoon at the same spot where Nathan had proposed. Faith, now almost 2 and walking confidently, carried the rings on a special cushion. Evelyn officiated the ceremony, and the students from our training program provided the music. "When I bought a broken man at that auction," I said during my vows, "I never imagined I was actually buying my future, my family, and the love of my life." Nathan smiled through tears. "And when I accepted your $50 offer," he replied, "I didn't know I was getting much more than a job. I was getting a second chance at happiness." Today, 5 years after that first auction, our Hartwell Institute for Sustainable Agriculture trains over 200 people annually. We have partnerships with universities in 3 states. Our graduates have a 90% success rate in establishing their own agricultural operations, and we receive visitors from other countries interested in replicating our methods. Faith is now a vibrant 7-year-old girl who speaks fluently about crop rotation and animal nutrition. She helps Nathan feed the animals every morning before school and insists she's going to be a farmer and scientist when she grows up. Nathan never lost his business acumen, but now it's directed towards goals that nourish his soul instead of just building wealth. He found a way to use his talents for something greater than personal profit, and that brought a peace and satisfaction I see in his eyes every day. As for me, I discovered I'm stronger than I ever imagined. The desperate woman who went to that auction years ago evolved into someone confident in her ability to face any challenge. I manage the educational aspects of the Institute, develop curricula, and speak at conferences on sustainable agriculture in rural communities. Sometimes when I'm on the porch at the end of a long day, watching Nathan teach Faith to milk our dairy cow or seeing our students work in the fields, I remember that terrible morning when I thought I would lose everything. I never could have imagined that buying a broken man at a labor auction would bring me not only financial salvation, but a complete family, a renewed purpose, and a love that continues to grow every day. Faith runs onto the porch, laughing as Nathan chases her, pretending to be a monster. She throws herself into my lap, safe and loved, unaware that her very existence helped heal 2 broken hearts and create something beautiful from what once seemed hopeless. "Mommy," she says, looking at Nathan, who approaches with a smile that still makes my heart race, "Daddy said tonight we're going to see shooting stars." "That's right," Nathan confirms, kissing my head and then Faith's. "And we're going to make wishes." Subscribe to the channel and leave a like to get access to more stories like this. I look at my family, our thriving institute, and the valley stretching beyond our porch, and I realize I don't need shooting stars to make wishes. All my dreams have already come true.